What we're going to be looking at today is Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central, and we call it Business Central, or BC for short. This is Microsoft's ERP for mid-market. And by mid-market, that's typically companies in the $20 million to $500 million range. Business Central provides finance, warehousing, manufacturing, jobs, and service capabilities. Implementations are usually in the $150,000 to $500,000 range. Business Central is available worldwide. You can run it in the cloud on Microsoft Azure, or we do have some clients that like to run it on premise, especially for validated environments, but I don't think that's so much, we don't see that so much with chemical. Now, a thing I want to point out with Business Central, while it does a whole lot, there's over 1,000 extensions that extend the functionality of Business Central available on something called Microsoft App Source. Now, we're going to be looking at a few of those extensions today. That's what the focus of this webinar is all about. So first up, what we're going to look at is the quality extension, and this is from a German company called Yavion. Now, what quality does is it allows us to create inspection plans, issue certificates of analysis. We can put lots on hold, we can pass fail, we can put them in quarantine. So it's very useful for our chemical manufacturing clients. Now, coupled with that is something called compliance. Now, we don't see electronic signatures as much of a requirement in like non-FDA regulated industries, but it is a fantastic way to reduce paper. If you want to take your whole inspection or your quality process and have it online, have it integrated with your inventory system, this is a way to do that. And then you can have sign-offs and see who did what and when they did that using the compliance module. So that's the reason for the inclusion in that today. And then the third thing that we're going to look at is called the delivery rating module. Now, this takes information from not just the quality module, but also the purchasing system. So it takes into consideration metrics like delivery dates, quantity variances, pricing variances, and combines that with the quality results so that you can then do a vendor rating process. So it's very useful. And something neat about that module, you can also rate yourself. So, and provide to your customers statistics about how well you do what you do. So with that, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to turn it over to Marcus, and he is going to walk through those three modules for you today.
So as George said, we're looking at some extensions from ProBatch. So just to note, I have these extensions loaded into my system. The design concept of the extensions is that enhancements to the application really look and act just like the native Business Central application. So as we go through the system, I'm actually going to highlight specific fields and specific functionality that's related to the ProBatch modules, although they are going to look like the native Business Central pages, forms, fields, etc. Okay, so just know that there is additional functionality that's been added into the system. All right, first thing I want to do is I want to just talk a little bit about lot management, and I'm going to do that using this item summary page window. And I'm going to just search based on a specific item, which is my tomato juice that I have set up in the system. So with ProBatch, again, we have additional functionality that sits on top of the base Business Central functionality. So with Business Central out of the box, we do have the ability to do serialized tracking of items as well as lot number tracking of items. So setting up a lot number format, auto assigning it, etc. Again, we've got that lot tracking or lot management that happens in the system. What ProBatch brings to the table then is the ability to add some additional functionality around the lot number and the lot itself. And what I want to do is I want to start by just highlighting the ability to do a lot status. So the lot status is configurable depending on what sort of statuses you need. In my system, I've got a release status, I've got a QC status, I've got a quarantine, a finished QC. So I've got, I think, 5 different statuses that a particular lot can have. Again, you can define these based on your business processes or the terms that you might use. But what the system allows me to do is to manage the disposition of the lot. So it's not just having the lot on hand, but what status does the lot have? And then I can create rules around the lot status itself. So for example, what I've got is my system set up so that when a particular item is received into inventory, it's going to be in a quarantine status. With the quarantine status, and you notice that I've got a little traffic light control on there, basically that lot is not usable in the system. And I can control that using what we call posting rules. And what the posting rules do is they dictate where and when can I use a particular lot based on, could be its status, it could be its expiration date, there could be other characteristics that I might want to limit the ability to use a particular lot. But again, this is managed with posting rules. So in my scenario, what I've said is that a lot needs to be released before it could be shipped to a customer or before it could be consumed in the manufacturing process. Now, I've got these intermediary steps or the intermediary statuses on the lot. And what that does is it helps me identify where in the quality life cycle or the quality process within my organization is this particular lot. So as I said, a lot comes in via purchasing, it's going to be in a quarantine status. Now, once I actually start the inspection process, then the status of a particular lot is going to say QC on it. And what that means is my quality department has been alerted that a quality inspection needs to be performed, and they've actually started that process. Okay, so that's going to be QC. I could then have a QC finish status. So maybe I need to take certain materials, certain components, and actually send them out to an external lab, or maybe I have an internal lab, but it might take days or hours to get the results back on a particular product. What I have is an intermediary step then to tell everyone in the organization that the QC process is finished at this point, and I'm essentially waiting results. Okay, so I can have different statuses based on where things are at in the quality process, and then once it passes my quality inspection, my system is set up to put the product into a release status. Okay, but again, ProBatch allows you to create various statuses configurable based on your particular requirements, the terms that you might use, and then the process that you want to use. But posting rules then limit the ability to use that product in whatever, either shipping or consumption. That's typically what you'd see. Lot posting rules, or the posting rules in general, also allow me to leverage expiration dates. That would be the other place primarily we see that. So maybe what I want to do is I want to say if a particular raw material component is within X days of expiration, I also don't want to consume that in the manufacturing process, or I may not want to ship it to the customer. Okay, so those are other things that we could do with the status. So status itself, but also we could use and manage the expiration date information. We also have extensive item tracking, and I'm gonna just go over here to a particular product here, and I'm gonna go to the ProBatch item tracing. So with the ProBatch item tracing, I've got the ability to look at lot numbers that have been consumed or used in my process, and from a lot trace, I can go usage to origin or origin to usage. So in this case, I'm starting with usage, which would be my finished good output, and I'm tracing back to the origin. If I turn this trace method around and go from origin to usage, I could look at an inbound purchase order. Maybe my vendor notified me that there was a problem with a particular lot, and I could see where did I actually consume that product, where in the manufacturing process, and then maybe what final products did it go to, and then who ultimately maybe was the product shipped to. Okay, so I can do forward or backward usage to origin, lot tracking. Let's just look at what this shows me here though. So in this case, I've got a final output here, which is my finished good. What you'll notice is I have a series of consumption records, and really what that's showing me is the raw material inputs into the finished good. So here's a variety of different items, and then the specific lot numbers that were consumed. I've exploded then in just showing the detail of a particular item in this process. So this is item 125-99513. And what you'll notice is I have the ability to track even the warehouse transactions around a particular lot. So for example, if I needed to know in terms of almost contact tracing, who or what individuals actually had contact with a particular lot, if I look at this line here, which is a pick or a put away transactions, and I scroll over here to the right, what you'll notice is I have the ability to track the specific individuals that had contact with that product, as well as a date and time stamp that they had contact with it. So if you think about contamination or contact tracing in terms of maybe a chemical spill or contact to a chemical that I need to get back to the users that could have been affected, I can get to that information. I also have the ability to see the specific location and bin information of the product as well. So even if I had, maybe I had a container that leaked or it was broken, and I wanted to know everywhere that that container had been in my warehouse, I can get to that information as well. Again, if I had to, clean bins or do bin tracing in that sense information. And then ultimately, I can get back to the purchase receipt, which would tie back to the purchase order. So I would know when did I receive this item. So full lot tracing capabilities through the system again, or usage to origin, origin to usage in the system. In addition to a lot number, ProBatch also adds some package tracking. So if you've got maybe storage containers, or you've got drums that you're actually bringing into the system, and you need to track, let's say, a package number or a serial number associated with that drum, I can do that as well. ProBatch, in terms of the lot tracking, also, and that's what they would call maybe, well, package is a little bit different than a load carrier. A load carrier could also be pallet tracking. So if I have multiple items, maybe the multiple barrels that are sitting on a pallet, I can do load tracking, package tracking at the lot level. Okay, so some more detailed tracking that comes with the ProBatch system. Okay. All right, let's in the next step here, let's look a little bit at the quality component. And quality is quality starts with what I would say is features. So if I look at a particular lot, we have the ability to identify features, and features would be particular characteristics that we want to track either on an item or on an item at a lot level. And features can also carry a value or carry a measurement. So pretty mundane here, I've got temperature, but what you'll notice is that as I navigate from lot to lot, I've got values associated with those features that are changing. So specific things that I would identify about a feature, or I'm sorry, about a lot, I can track in the system. So let's look at features a little bit and talk about some components that we can set up with those. So a feature really could be anything that I want to identify in the system. And really I have different data types, which is what I'd want to draw your attention to. So I can have decimal values, which again would be a numeric. I have the ability to do features that can be options. So an option would be a predefined drop-down list. So if I'm doing a visual screening on an inbound product, I could say, is there damage to the outside packaging? Has it been wet? Is it dented? Is it broken? Is it cracked? So those could all be predefined values, for example, on an option. Decimals obviously could be more specific chemical calculations. If I want to do that, I have the ability to do Booleans. So most often we see this, around food. Is it a nut allergy? Is it a kosher? But this would be a true, false, yes or no kind of component in a Boolean. So that would be my list. So these are some examples of different types of features that can be tracked in the system. I want to draw your attention to this, which is actually a calculation formula. So we have the ability, for example, if we wanted to take several different measures, several different features that we would want to track. So maybe I'm tracking 4 things. Those 4 values then are used as a 5th value, a 5th feature value. Those can all be calculated. So if I wanted to take, the result of test 1, the result of test 2, the result of test 3, perform some sort of math against using those 3 inputs to calculate again a 4th value, that's what the calculation formula would allow me to do. So I don't need to manually calculate the 4th value. It is going to be dependent on the measurements of the other 3. All right, so I can do those sorts of things. I'm going to open up potency, and let's just talk about this a little bit. I also have the ability to take these feature values and then have that value transferred during the manufacturing process. So for example, potency. Potency is going to be calculated using a weighted average as I consume a particular input into the manufacturing process. So essentially what I've got here is a diluted calculation. So I've got a potency or an effective ingredient. It's X grams. When it gets into the batch that is, maybe 10,000 pounds or something like that, what happens to the effective ingredient based on the weighted average calculation? And this could be additive, it could be average, min-max, or a weighted average calculation. So it's allowing me to use those feature values within the manufacturing process to come up with another calculation, okay? These features can also be used in the quality assurance calculation, and we're going to talk more specifically in a moment about leveraging those, but just know that there's a connection there. We also have the ability to take a specific feature value and then output that value on a certificate of analysis. I just point out the ability to flag a particular feature as output on a cert or not. So, and again, my example of I've got 3 inputs to calculate a 5th value. Maybe those 4 inputs I don't want to actually display on the certificate of analysis. I would just want that 5th calculated value. So I can record all those individual components, but only display the certificate, that 5th value on the certificate of analysis. So there's some control over how those components work. All right, so we've got items defined, we have features defined. Let's look at how those come together then in a quality assessment. And what we start with is what we call an inspection plan. And I'm going to open up one of these inspection plans. What an inspection plan allows us to do is to determine first, what are we going to inspect? And from an inspection perspective, we can inspect individual inventory items. We can inspect a group of items. So if we have different individual items, we can put those into what they call a QC group and then apply the same quality standards to that group of items. We can also inspect equipment, and primarily where we see this used is if I have a laboratory, an internal laboratory, and I want to go through some recalibration or something like that on a regular basis. I could perform inspections on that equipment. I could perform inspections on equipment that's used in the manufacturing process. So again, I'm thinking about calibration, but other inspections could be done on the equipment as well. So just know that those types of things can be done. This particular example, what I've set up is a specific inspection plan for a specific inventory item. And again, that item happens to be the B001. All right, I'm gonna open this up a little bit. We also have the ability to set up inspections that can still apply to specific items or item groups, but we can then layer a further restriction on them to apply only to specific vendors or a group of vendors, or only to a customer or specific customers. So in this scenario, maybe I have a new vendor and I want to go through some inspection processes just as it applies to a particular vendor. Again, it's a new vendor. I want to make sure the inbound product is conforming to my standards until I go through some vendor approval process. Okay, so these could be inspections that only apply to specific vendors. On the customer side of things, what this allows us to do is to change manufacturing specifications or quality specifications that would be specific to a customer. So maybe in general, I manufacture a product to X specification, but a particular customer may want more stringent specifications applied to them. They may want or allow more laxed specifications applied to them, or they may have specific components that I don't normally measure that I need to measure for that customer. And maybe that'll be, again, a specific certificate of analysis for that specific customer. Okay, so it allows us to do, again, some more specific testing around either inbound or outbound transactions. I can then determine really at what level do I want to perform an inspection. So I've got the items here, or I've got the ability to do at the item level, a lot level, or a serial number level. And what this is going to do is this is helping determine, actually it is not helping, it's determining the number of samples that I'm going to be taking during the inspection process. So for example, if I say at the item level, I get one item in on a PO, it has 4 different lot numbers. The system is just going to prompt me for one sample because I'm saying, no, I just want to test at the item level. I'm not going to test at the lot number level. At the lot level of inspection, if I had one item, 4 lots, the system then would prompt me for 4 inspections, and it's going to associate those inspections with the specific lot numbers that are inbound. If I did it at the serial number level, again, if I had one item, 4 lots, let's say 8 serial numbers, and this may or may not apply to you, it's going to then determine the number of samples need to be taken based on the number of serial numbers that are entered into the system. So I'm just going to go at the lot level. Then down here at the inspection line items, what this allows me to determine is what sort of features do I want to evaluate and when do I want that evaluation to be taking place. Okay, so at the header level, I said I want to test a particular item. Now, what am I going to test and when am I going to test that? Okay, so the inspection group in this case determines what my inspection source is. So when in the process do I want this inspection to take place? What you'll notice here is I have the ability to flag inspections throughout my process. So purchase cycle, so I've got purchase orders, purchase receipts, and return orders. So purchase order and purchase receipt would be inbound product from my vendor. A purchase return would be an outbound return to a vendor. So if there are specific inspections or measurements that need to be taken prior to returning a product to a vendor, I can actually set that up as a different inspection process. Purchase order and purchase receipts, if you're familiar with Business Central, you know you have the ability to enable warehouse operations or not in your business process flow. So if you do not have warehouse transactions enabled, you'd be performing the inspection at the purchase order level. If you are using warehouse, then it would be at the purchase receipt level. Sales, so similar to the purchase side, I've got the sales cycle. So sales order, sales shipment, again, depending on your warehouse configuration, you use one or the other. Sales return order, so that would be a return from the customer, as well as a sales return receipt. So in that scenario, we would be looking at an RMA, sales return order that's been issued to the customer. The customer ships you the product back. You can perform specific inspections around that return process as well. Production order to production routing line. What this allows us to do is perform inspections either for a specific production order or during the production process, which would be that production routing line level. So if you think about a production order and I might have 5 or 6 steps, if I want to, to check particular values of a product during the manufacturing process, that would be the production order routing line. Inventory inspections and stability tests. Let's talk a little bit about those. So if you have raw materials or finished goods that are sitting in the warehouse, what an inventory inspection allows me to do is to perform a one-off inspection of inventory. So maybe you have a scenario where the product has been sitting in the warehouse and you want to perform an inspection to make sure it's still good, it's still usable product, again, either raw material or finished good. The inventory inspection would be a one-off ability to do that. A stability test is going to allow me to schedule on a time interval those inspections. So maybe every 30 days, I want to go through a stability test of the raw materials that I have in my warehouse. I would set up a stability test then, and the system will look for particular lots that meet the stability test parameters. Again, typically maybe I've got it, if it's sitting in the warehouse for 30 days, I want to perform a stability test against it. That's what that would allow me to do. Transfer orders are going to be different. So a transfer order is a transaction, an inventory movement that you've created from one warehouse to another warehouse within your environment. Again, transferring between inventory locations. This allows you then to perform an inspection of that receipt. So if you're moving inventory from location 1 to location 2, maybe it's a visual screening to say, is that package damaged, cracked, broken between location 1 and location 2. So that's what that would be. A manual is manual, and then a system is a little more manual process there as well. Okay, so what I've said in this example is I have a particular item, and on a PO receipt, I want to evaluate two features. Essentially one, I'm taking the temperature of one, and then the Celsius is going to automatically be calculated based on my Fahrenheit temperature. So pretty basic evaluation or inspection that's done here. Again, these could be lab required tasks. They could be all sorts of different things. But in this case, I'm just doing a simple temperature check. The system does allow me to then add, if I need to, inspection methods in the system. And what the inspection method would maybe allow me to do, or maybe the best use case would be if I have a specific evaluation that needs to happen on a piece of equipment. So an inspection method could be associated with a particular instrument, a particular scale, something like that, and then associate that that feature with a piece of equipment. What that also allows me to do is to set some parameters or some restrictions around a user's ability to actually evaluate a particular feature value. So maybe I have to have some sort of license or certification to perform a particular test, okay? So my user can be associated with skills that can be associated with a particular inspection method to just allow my user versus another user to perform the inspection. Okay, so this can sort of lock down that process if needed or if necessary in your environment. Otherwise, you don't need to. Okay. All right, so we have some data value information about the particular feature value. Next thing I want to talk about, though, is this target value and then the upper and lower control limits. So what this allows us to do is to set a target value for a particular feature evaluation. So the scenario there is I'm performing an inspection. My targeted value for temperature is 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay? I then can identify upper and lower control limits as well as upper and lower tolerances associated with that particular evaluation. So if I perform the test and it comes back at 61 degrees, I fall within my upper and lower tolerances, versus if it comes in at 66 degrees or 54 degrees, those are going to be outside of my tolerances. I talked first when we were looking at the status of a lot about the posting rules. And what the posting rules, again, determine is the usability of a particular lot in the process based on the status of a lot. What these control limits allow me to do is to set rules to also change the status of the lot based on the results of the inspection being performed. So if it meets my control limits, I'm going to set the status of my lot to released. If it meets my tolerance limits but not my control limits, maybe I've got that in I don't know, some sort of further evaluation status or something like that. If it falls outside of my control limits, then maybe what I do is I block it or I put it back into a quarantine status or something like that. But the point being is that I'm determining the status of a lot based on the evaluation of a particular feature during an inspection. Okay, so that's what that does. All right, the next section here is really dealing with a samples calculation. So depending on how you set your header to say, do I evaluate at the item or the lot number, this is then going to determine the number of samples that need to be taken for a particular result. So in this scenario, I say I want 4 samples. So if I'm evaluating at the item level, okay, the system is going to prompt me in this case for 4 samples to be taken for each individual item. If I say the evaluation needs to be at a lot level, what the system is going to do is it's going to prompt the user to take 4 samples for every lot. So if I have 4 lots, 1 item, 4 samples, it's actually going to prompt the user for 16 samples. Again, 4 per each lot. So depending on what your process is or how you want these evaluations to be performed, the system can then prompt for the proper number of samples to be taken. Okay. The next thing here is the sample calculation method. So in this case, I'm evaluating temperature. If I have 1 lot, I'm going to take 4 temperature values. And when I'm telling the system, this is a validation based on the number of packages as well. So in my scenario where I said I had a drum And if I had one lot, but that lot was in 2 drums, do I want to take 4 samples of the lot, or do I also want to add the package dimension in here as well? So I could say one lot, it's in 2 drums, I want 4 samples, so that in that case of saying I want the number of per packages as well, it would give me 8 samples. Okay, so again, packaging can be part of this calculation as well, which would be, again, very important if you've got multiple drums, for example, of a product. Okay, the next section though is the sample results calculation. That was what I was after, sorry about that. What this tells us to do is if I have those multiple samples, how do I actually want to calculate the value at the lot? So even though I have 4 samples taken per lot, how do I actually want to calculate the value of the feature that I'm assigning to the lot? And in this case, I'm saying average. So what I would do is I take 4 samples, I'm going to take the temperature of that lot 4 times. The 4 values then are going to be averaged to create the output or the feature value on the lot itself. I could do sum, I could do min, I could do max. So maybe again, it's the max temperature that I'm really concerned about. I'm going to take 4 temperatures. The max temp that I get is going to be used then to assign to the feature. Okay, so that's that calculation again with the samples. I do have the ability to denote something as a destructive inspection. So maybe more applicable if you think of the manufacturing process where you've got raw materials or components that are single units, something that's a tangible unit versus liquids. But maybe I take a particular unit and I'm going to perform an inspection on it, and I'm going to do some sort of weight inspection that's going to destroy the item. So this is going to automatically deduct from inventory that component. Could still be useful with liquids, for example, if you are taking samples, and what it would do is it would reduce the volume then of the remaining inventory based on the sample volume that I'm taking. Okay, so it just depends on how, is that important to you or not. ProBatch does also give you the ability to print sample labels. So if I have some sort of container, I'm going to take liquid out my sample, I'm going to put it into a container, I'm going to seal it. I can place a label then on that container. So during, for example, a purchase order receipt, the end user or the operator can print or generate those labels, adhere them to the container. That label itself is configurable, but out of the box, it's going to associate a particular inspection number, the lot number, the item number, any inbound, in case of a purchase, it would be the purchase order, the purchase receipt, etc. So on the label should be enough information for the laboratory to associate that particular sample to a particular test that needs to be performed. We can do some cost tracking on that lot as well if we want to put some overhead to it. And then output on the certificate of analysis. So as features are being evaluated, I can tie an inspection, or I'm sorry, a certificate of analysis to the inspection and then generate that off of the system. All right. So what this allows me to do then again is to assign features to specific inspection sources. This one I've set up as an inventory inspection, same item, same features, but again, I could have different tolerances on here if I wanted to as well. All right. Once the system actually identifies that a transaction needs to be processed, what I'm going to end up with is what we call an inspection order. And I thought I had that out there, but maybe not. So let's go here. So I have a released inspection order. So the inspection order itself would be used, for example, by a lab tech scientist if they're going to perform an inspection. And what this is going to do is it's going to create a separate document or an inspection order number. This is really key from a control perspective. So I had an inspection plan, but the actual inspection order is going to be created when a particular transaction meets the requirements that have been identified on that inspection plan. So in this case, what I've said is I had a specific item, B001, and I said on inbound purchase orders, I want to create an inspection. Okay, so this is similar to, actually, this is the inspection order that was created off that plan that we looked at. What this tells then your lab is the object that I need to inspect it's going to show me the business relationship type. So this is a vendor. Obviously, I bought the item from a vendor on a PO receipt, the vendor number. It's going to identify the lot number, and it's going to tell me how many packages are associated with that particular transaction. So pretty straightforward, single lot, and just one package. So pretty basic here. It's also going to tell the operator then what transaction is this associated with, so that we can see this is a warehouse receipt 9, it's line 10,000. If I had some sort of sample calculation, it would also give me that information. But down here at the bottom then, what this shows me is it prompted me for one inspection for the lot in this particular example, and then the operator can record the actual value of that particular inspection, the results of the inspection, etc. Okay? And this would then create, again, an inspection order that I can process in the system. The inspection order can also have different statuses. So as I showed you the lot disposition, as this particular released inspection order goes through the process of the inspection is started, the inspection is finished, and then the entire order is finished, the status of the lot can change, again, based on the status of that in conjunction with the values or the tolerances that I have on the inspection order. Okay, so kind of as complex as you would want this to be or as straightforward as you'd want it to be, the system can record those. I also have this little screen here, which is actual value recording. Oh, I can't get to it because it's closed. That would allow me, just from a data entry perspective, just to see the specific evaluations or the specific tests or features that I'm evaluating in a little cleaner window. Okay, so that's what that process would look like. The system can generate certificates of analysis as well. So if I have certificates of analysis, I'm just going to pull this up. A couple things to note here. One is that a certificate of analysis, although it's a report, it's actually a document that's been created at a particular point in time. This is rather important. So you'll notice that I've got 4 certificates of analysis that have actually been created for that particular item and for that particular lot. So I could have vendor-specific or customer-specific certs that have been created. I could have, let's say, one of those stability tests or an inventory inspection that's been created where the feature values have actually been changed. So maybe I've got a particular feature value that's that degrades over time. If it's an effective ingredient or moisture content, that sort of thing. Well, moisture content would be a big one. That certainly could change based on the relative humidity of a warehouse. So I would go do a stability test on that particular product. My moisture content has actually changed. What that would allow me to do then is to create a secondary certificate of analysis or a subsequent one after a secondary inspection has been processed. And obviously those values then would be changing. The key here though is that I have record of all of those certificates that have been created in the system. So it's an audit trail, but I also have information around those, okay? All right, certificate of itself, it's a report. So if I look at that and actually create the certificate so you can see what this looks like, preview it. Output is certainly modifiable. So from a visual perspective, if you want to make changes visually on the report itself, absolutely doable. The ability to do fonts, colors, graphics, that sort of thing can be created in the system. But point being is that we can generate, again, a certificate of analysis. It is a numbered document. I would get the information associated with the particular product information lot number. The rest of this information is configurable. So do I want, target values, upper and lower tolerances to be displayed on the item? Not displayed. Obviously I'd probably want the output value, but configurable in terms of what displays and what doesn't display on the certificate. I will point out that ProBatch also adds some translation information associated with outputs. So in this scenario, maybe what you want to do is you need the certificate of analysis output in a different language. So maybe I need it in German or Portuguese or Spanish or something like that. What the translations allow me to do is to actually display different text on the output based on some parameters. So again, if I'm shipping this to another warehouse and maybe they need it in Portuguese versus English, I can do that on the cert. Right. Okay. Those are the highlights really of the quality components that I wanted to hit. The key there is inspection plans can be created at various levels. I can do vendor specific, customer specific. I'm going to evaluate features during those plans, outputs of the certificates of analysis, as well as the disposition of the lot, all key components inside of that component. All right, let's talk a little bit around compliance. And around compliance, what I want to talk about is really the ability to do first, let's talk about data. So within Business Central, we have the ability to do change log transactions. What the change log allows me to do is to audit really any field in the system. And what I'm going to get from that is the ability to track a field. If a field value was added, changed, or deleted in the system, a log or a transaction log is going to be created of that. What I'm going to know is what field value am I looking at, the value before and after the change. So if it's new, it's obviously before it was blank, now there's a value. If it's changed, it's going to know it was 1 and now it's 7. Or if it's deleted, it's going to capture what was the value at the time of deletion. And then who did the change and when. Okay, so full audit trail around, again, added records, changed or updated records, as well as deleted records. In addition, then we also have the ability to do electronic signatures. So electronic signatures allow me to create an approval process primarily related to the change in a status of a particular document. Okay, so typically what we see is these are around feature definitions, around inspection plans, around manufacturing specifications. So in this scenario, for example, if an inspection plan goes from under development to certified, I need someone to review and approve that change and sign off on it. Okay, so that's what this electronic signature would allow me to do. So essentially, in a certified state, this inspection plan is not editable. If I wanted to change, for example, maybe my upper or lower control tolerances, the process would be to take this into an under development status, make a change to the tolerance limits, and then put it back into a certified status. The certified status is the document that would be used to process transactions. Okay, so if I have an inspection, I take it out of the inspection process, make a change, and then put it certified again. What I can do then with the electronic signatures is as those statuses change in the system, I may want a second party review of that change. So what I can say in the case of a status change, I'm going to change the control limits of this particular inspection. Prior to it being released, the rule could be set up that George actually has to review and approve that change. Okay. What the electronic signature then does is give you a record of who approved the change and when. I can also add some notes or some context around the change. So maybe as a person making the change, I can say, well, I'm going to change that upper control limit from 65 to 64 degrees. I may put some notes in there to say, our testing has said that, the really above 64 degrees, we're not getting the results that we want. So some sort of note that goes in there. When I submit the change for review and approval, George is then notified that his change has been made to an inspection plan. He can review the notes that I've made, he can review the value change, and then he can sign off that the approval has been made. A couple things to note about electronic signatures is one, they do need to be users inside of Business Central. So users are not external users, the users have to be inside of Business Central. The other thing is that password essentially that approval user enters is different than their network password. So what that allows you to do is to actually set, you can set more restrictive or less restrictive rules around that password. So most people have, complex long passwords set up within their Active Directory today. When we initially looked at electronic signatures, some companies may or may not have actually set up those more restrictive password rules. So electronic signatures allowed you to, for your approval users, make the password process more complex. You can still do that. Maybe if you've got passwords for your domain that maybe expire on a quarterly basis, you could, if you wanted more stringent rules around your electronic signatures, make those update on a monthly basis. You could also extend it. So maybe for approval processes, you say, well, annual change of a password is more than adequate. You could do that as well. So that's what around the electronic signature rules. Rules can also be cascading. So you can do multiple users or groups of users, that sort of thing. So that's inherently part of the electronic signature component as well. What you'll see is throughout the system, there are various places that the compliance rules can take into effect. So if we go to features, for example, the features themselves, the definition of the feature, I have the ability to control that with an electronic signature as well. This one happens to have a change. So what you'll notice is that I had a master data change that has occurred. So it's auditable. I can review it. I can see, who changed it, when they changed it, et cetera. So I submitted the change and I also signed off on the change, but who and when that change was made. So we do have audits of the electronic signatures as well, not just a data component. Okay. All right. Given some time, I'm going to transition us over to vendor rating, and I want to talk a little bit about vendor rating to start with. So the idea behind the vendor rating is I have multiple inputs that can be considered when I rate my vendor. And I'm just going to open up a particular vendor, and we're going to go down here to the vendor rating first of all. The system around vendor rating is very configurable. So the system does not force you into a vendor rating of ABC. You could do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K. You could do high, medium, low. You really can create whatever categories make sense for your industry or for your organization around delivery ratings. Okay, I just said ABC. Again, this could be whatever you want. Okay, so that's really nice in the sense of the terminology that you use in an organization very much can be that can shape the configuration of delivery rating. Okay, so that's one example. The next thing to really think about as it relates to vendor rating is the calculation of the rating. What sort of things do you as an organization want to consider in determining how am I actually going to rate a vendor? Okay, and what I want to do is I just want to go to this particular vendor, and we're going to go to vendor delivery rating, and I want to look at the rating itself. And what I want to do is just talk about sort of the configuration options that we have around delivery rating. So out of the box, I've got the ability to evaluate delivery rating based on-time delivery. So this is going to look at the dates at the line item level. If I said I wanted it on the 1st and they delivered it on the 3rd, what do I want to do with the vendor rating? The calculation then and the weighting allows me to determine, do I want points to be additive or do I want to subtract points based on the particular actions of the vendor? So for example, if your vendor rating, if every vendor starts with 100 points, then maybe what I want to do is on-time delivery gives me 10 points. A late delivery for one day would maybe give me 4 points. And then a late delivery more than 2 days maybe gives me -3 points. Okay, the system allows you to do point value evaluations based on the evaluation of an on-time delivery. Again, maybe 2 days early is also negative points, right? So maybe on time with the day that it was required gives me 10 points, but any variation either prior to my expected delivery date or after my expected delivery date would adjust the point calculations that's being evaluated for the vendor rating. Okay, so lots of things we can do on the vendor on-time delivery. We have the ability to evaluate the number of deliveries. So if again, I want 10 points because I ordered 10 and I got 10, if they've delivered 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, 7 times, my point evaluation can vary based on the number of times. At some points, maybe they get negative 10 points because they've delivered 10 times. Okay, so that all can be configured. So I can also do short deliveries. So some sort of variation of I ordered 10, I got 6, and maybe the PO closed at 6. So do I want to do some sort of reevaluation on the vendor rating based on their short delivery? I can also do over deliveries. So if I ordered 6 and they delivered 7, I could affect the delivery rating from there. I also can impact the delivery rating on quality evaluations. So we looked at an inspection plan and inspection order. I can also then create a delivery rating impact based on the evaluation of quality and feature measures during, let's say, a PO receipt. So is the product damaged? Yes or no? Did it fall within my tolerance requirements? Yes or no? How close did they get to the tolerance requirements? Again, I can calculate a point value change based on the results of an inspection. All right, so fairly complex calculations that can go into the delivery rating, but also very specific to the things that you want to track in your organization related to vendor rating. And then also it's not just an additive point system. So it's not that I get 2 points for this and 2 points for that, 2 points for that. I could start at a base point and then actually add or remove or subtract points as well. Okay, so very configurable in terms of how you want the system to evaluate vendor rating. I also have the ability then to look at what they call soft criteria. A soft criteria could be just a manual adjustment to the vendor rating. So maybe I called because I had an issue and the vendor was worked with me, was very responsive, all that sort of stuff. These soft evaluations could also add or remove points as well to the vendor rating. So look at it more as a manual adjustment, if you will, to the rating itself. So what happens then is I have all of these different measures that I've set up. By the way, those measures can also be vendor specific or vendor group specific. So I can do actually vendor specific changes to the vendor rating if I wanted to. So it can get fairly layered in that sense. But then what I would do is I would calculate the vendor rating. I could say I want to look at it on a monthly basis, or maybe the last 6 months, or if I'm doing a trailing 12 months rating. However, from a date range perspective, maybe I want all of life of the vendor. You can determine all those. Then I would determine bracketing based on the number of points that a particular vendor gets during the evaluation process, what their category is. Okay, so it's a layered process. Define the calculation process based on the date range, and then that's going to deliver a rating to the vendor. All that to say, I can also take delivery rating and apply it to the customer side of things. So what that allows me to do is actually rate my delivery, my performance, my interaction with the customer. So same idea, short deliveries, multiple deliveries, on-time deliveries, quality associated with output, that I meet their specifications, not. Same type of calculation can go again, and it's still called delivery rating, except it's on the customer side. So how well are we doing as an organization? All right. Last thing I just want to mention as part of really compliance quality is the ability to manage hazardous materials. So we do have some integrations with hazmat databases, the ability to put a material data sheet together, et cetera, for inventory items. It is an integration at an item level. So there are specific characteristics that get set up on the item to deliver what your system, your safety data sheet information needs to contain based on the components that are a part of an inventory item. So fairly complex problem that in 3 minutes we don't have time to go through, but just know that that component is available as well.